What if you could prepare a no-fuss meal on a weeknight that gave you a head start on an even quicker meal for another weeknight? This week's recipes do just that. They're what I call a 2-for-1. Like my tender grilled lamb chops topped with steak butter that make a second appearance as herbed feta burgers. Or my spice-packed Peruvian baked chicken thighs that do double duty to top off my spicy Tomatillo salsa nachos with all the toppings. Weeknight meals that are twice as nice. Coming up next. Funding provided by
Acacia Vineyard is proud to sponsor Sara's Weeknight Meals. With our handcrafted Chardonnay and Pinot Noir wines, we enjoy sharing the earth's bounty and the simple joy of bringing friends and family to the table.
At Subaru, we build vehicles like the versatile Subaru Outback with symmetrical all-wheel drive standard and plenty of cargo room. Because some of the most adventurous days fall in between the weekends. Subaru, a proud sponsor of Sara's Weeknight Meals.
My mom, she's a magician. She turns water into soda, saving the planet from bottles.
SodaStream, proud to support the magic of public television.
King Arthur Flour, over 1,500 recipes online at kingarthurflour.com.
Hi, I'm Sara Moulton. Welcome to Sara's Weeknight Meals. I love lamb chops, but you know they can be so pricey, particularly if you get the rib chops or the loin chops. So I'm going to be cooking with shoulder or leg chops today. I'm going to top them with a steak butter, and I'm going to make 6. And guess what? We're only going to serve 4 and save 2 for another day and make a whole nother meal. I'm going to start with the steak butter just to get my butter softening. And this is a great all-purpose butter that you can put in the freezer and just have for another day. It's called compound butter because you add all this stuff to it. And to quick soften it, I'm cutting it into smaller pieces. So this is how you quick soften butter. Just cut it into pieces. I like to use my trusty little bench scraper here. We've got 2 different kinds of lamb chops here. There are lamb shoulder chops, which obviously come from the shoulder of the lamb. They're a little tougher, but they have lots of flavor, and they generally have good marbling. But we have another choice, and that's what I'm going to use today. These are leg chops. They're cut from the leg, and these are so large, I'm going to count each one of them as if it was 2 chops. And you just want to portion it into about 6 portions, because tonight we're going to need 4, and then later on in the week we're going to need another 2. And we're going to marinate the lamb, because we like to add a little extra flavor. Actually, a marinade only penetrates the surface of meat about 1/4 inch. I'm going to mince 3 cloves of garlic. 2 is going to go into the marinade, and 1's going to go into the butter. I'm going to add a little salt, one of my tricks that I do. What the salt does is it helps to tenderize the garlic. It acts like an abrasive, so it's easier to chop. It means that the garlic doesn't stick to your knife quite the way it usually does. Okay, that looks pretty good. So 2/3 of this is going in the marinade, very scientific, and 1/3 of it is going in the butter. Now, I'm gonna finish the rest of my marinade. And it's just a very simple Mediterranean-style marinade. We're gonna have some lemon juice, about 2 tablespoons. And what I'm doing in here is making the marinade right in a resealable bag, so that way we can just throw the chops in here and toss them around. And let me talk about marination. I mentioned that it doesn't penetrate more than 1/4 inch, so why would you bother if it's not going to really tenderize the chops? You bother because it's going to flavor the chops. All right, so there's our 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Now we need a teaspoon of salt, kosher salt, and some pepper, 1/2 teaspoon. And then our chops are going to go in. I have a total of 2.5 pounds of leg round bone chops, and we're going to save 2 of those chops for tomorrow. What's amazing is that you can make a second dinner out of 12 ounces worth of meat for 4 people. So we put this in here, we're gonna smush it around. Meat, whatever you're marinating, protein, will pick up the marinade faster at room temperature. So if you wanna speed things up, we'll leave it on the counter for a little while. Keeping in mind that you don't wanna ever go past 2 hours. But we're not worried about that here. I'm just worried about getting dinner on the table. All right, so I'm just gonna park this right here. Now, let me finish my butter. So in here we have the 2 sticks of softened, unsalted butter. I'm gonna add some Dijon mustard. We need just a tablespoon. And it doesn't matter, this isn't rocket science. Whatever, you could add more if you wanted. 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire. Worcestershire is an amazing ingredient. The recipe for it is protected. It was invented in England, and it's delicious, and you don't really quite know what's in there. Okay, and some salt, half a teaspoon of kosher salt, and I already put my garlic in there, and pepper, of course. I know that a lot of people are successful at softening butter briefly in a microwave, but I usually end up just melting the butter, which I don't want to do here. I want it to do its melting right on top of the steak. Okay, we're just about there. You could do this in a food processor, but you know, I hate to dirty another dish. And then what I like to do is put 1/4 of the mix each into its own little plastic package, or you could wrap it in parchment too if you wanted to. And then you just smush it into a little square. And I'm gonna pop this in the fridge just for a second because it's gotten a little softer than what I like. When you go to use it, understand this is 4 tablespoons. So let's say you want each person to have a little pat of butter on top of their item. You can just, when you unfold it, you can just visualize it, that each one of those is a tablespoon. Okay, I'm gonna pop this in the fridge just for a second because it's gotten a little softer than what I like. And we're gonna get our steaks on the grill. If they were just in olive oil, I wouldn't pat them dry, but they've got all that lemon juice on them, and we don't want them to sweat. See how hot this is, because I've been preheating it. You need to preheat these grills for a little while. Oh, that's nice. And we are going to cook all 6 pieces, even though we're not eating all 6 pieces tonight. We're going to grill these lamb chops about 2 to 3 minutes aside for medium rare, which is how I like them. Okay, I can tell these are done for 2 reasons. One, I peeked, okay? So I could see I'd gotten some nice color on the other side. But oftentimes when you're cooking meat, if the blood starts to pool on the top, that means that it's also ready to turn. That's another indication. Whatever you do, try not to turn it till it's ready. People have a tendency, particularly men, when they're grilling, they put the meat on, they put the steak on, and then they're poking it, and they're smushing it, and they're moving it. Don't touch the steak until you can see that it's ready to be turned. It will move, actually, when it's got a nice little crust. Okay, we let these rest for 5 minutes. We want the juices inside the meat to redistribute. I'm going to set aside 2 of these portions for later on, and then the rest of them we're going to top off with our butter. I'm going to put a little bit of this juice first on these guys, and I'm going to save a little bit of juice with my 2 reserved ones. Let me get my butter, and then what's going to happen is this is going to slowly melt on top of our lamb. It takes a minute, but it will get there, and then it sort of mixes with the juices on the plate, and you sort of have instant sauce. Okay, our side dishes are, this is individual potato gratins. I just love these little casserole dishes. It's so much fun to get your own. And then over here we have some creamed spinach. So this is sort of a perfect meal. Grilled lamb chops with steak butter, and then 2 extra chops we're going to use tomorrow for our lamb and feta burgers. recipe for herbed lamb and feta burgers is slightly miraculous. You take just a little more than 3/4 of a pound of cooked lamb chops and you turn them into a second entree for 4 people with a simple addition of breadcrumbs, feta cheese, and an egg, and a few herbs. But let's start down here with the onion. I've already cooked up one onion, and I got a little color on it, and I seasoned it. And we're gonna add this to our burger. These leg chops are pretty lean. Lamb shoulder chops are fattier, but we're using the leg chops. It's good we have the onions in here. This will add some extra moisture. Now, my lamb chops. Let's pretend it's several days later from our first meal, and you're gonna be so happy. It's 6:30, you just got home from work, you're like, oh, you know, I don't wanna spend a lot of time making dinner, and you're like, oh yes, I have those leftover lamb chops. Now, this could also be a leftover steak. This could be leftover cooked chicken. If you have roughly about 12 ounces, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna have enough to make 4 burgers. So I'm gonna rough chop these before I put them into the food processor so we can pulse them nicely. I know it seems weird to start with cooked meat to make a second burger, but trust me, it works. Okay, in it goes. We're gonna add 2 tablespoons of fresh oregano. That's very Greek, especially the fresh oregano. It's just so great. That's about 2 tablespoons. And I'm just gonna grind these up or chop these up along with the lamb. Right. Now, everything is gonna go in the bowl. So in goes the burger. Isn't that funny? It does sort of look like ground meat. And then we're gonna add egg for binder and some feta cheese. You could also use goat cheese, that would be just fine. 1 egg. Okay then, I've got about a cup. I'm gonna just dump this right in with everything else. I'm gonna add some breadcrumbs. That will also act as a binder. Now you notice I didn't put any salt in here, and that's because the feta cheese is so salty we don't need any more salt than that. 1/4 cup of, these are just store-bought dried breadcrumbs, and you could use the seasoned ones or the unseasoned ones. So I'm gonna put another 1/2 cup in here because we need to coat them on the outside. Okay, these are wet burgers, so don't worry. They're not gonna look exactly like a burger because obviously they're very different. It's basically cooked except for the raw egg, which is holding it together. So we're trying to just heat it through to cook that raw egg and also to get the crust on the outside. These will cook for about 3 minutes aside. Don't these look delicious? Keep in mind they are very delicate. We're gonna serve these sort of Greek style with just a little sort of Greek salad, some Mediterranean olives, and tzatziki, which is a mixture of Greek yogurt and shredded cucumbers, a little bit of garlic. You can add dill or herbs if you want to too. And then you can just pile them into pitas and maybe have a little shredded lettuce if you want to add that too, and boom, you got dinner. What a nice second act. Hi, can I have some chicken thighs? We don't eat a lot of takeout in my house because we just don't like it. But one of the things that we love is Peruvian rotisserie chicken. And we find it at a restaurant in New York. There's just something about it that's so special. As a matter of fact, it was so special, I've tried to bust the recipe, and that's what I'm gonna make right now. Only my version is not a whole rotisserie chicken, it's chicken thighs. Why? Because they cook a lot faster than a whole chicken, and they're so tasty. I mean, dark meat chicken really has a lot of flavor. When you cook it on the bone with the skin, which is what I'm gonna do, it's even tastier. So, start with a marinade. I've got in here some cilantro. If you hate cilantro, you could use some fresh oregano. I'm going to throw in 6 garlic cloves. These are sort of small, so I got a little more. So the rest of the marinade, we're going to add a half a cup of soy sauce and then a little vinegar. We got some white vinegar here, just 2 tablespoons. This is really a refreshing, wonderful chicken. There goes a tablespoon of oil. And this is just vegetable oil. A tablespoon of cumin. 1.5 teaspoons of paprika. Could be whatever paprika you like. Okay, now we're going to do 3/4 of a teaspoon of dried oregano. Now you can use 1/4 to 1/2 of cayenne. I'm going to go with 1/2. So that is everything in there, and we're just going to let it go in here. Why am I using a blender rather than a food processor? Because your marinade will get so much more ground up in a blender than it will in a food processor. Don't get me wrong, I love my food processor for other things. This is how I always marinate my meat, vegetables, whatever I'm marinating. It's just so much easier, so much less messy than putting it in a bowl and tossing it. And also, this has the added benefit that after you get the marinade in there, you close it up and you can smush it around without getting your hands all dirty, so that every last piece of chicken in here is going to get coated. And we're going to marinate this at room temperature because it will marinate and absorb the flavors a lot faster. We're doing this just for flavor purposes. I mean, there's not all that much tenderizing going on. Okay, I'm just going to put it over here and let it marinate for 30 minutes at room temp. So my chicken thighs have marinated for 30 minutes at room temperature, and I'm just patting them dry. They'll brown better when I pat them dry. Then discard the marinade. Here we go. Just pat them a little bit on top. Now, I preheated the oven to 450 degrees, and we're going to put these on a rack, which means that any fat will drip down. These are rather large chicken thighs. Normally, this takes about 20 to 25 minutes to get cooked through. The good news with dark meat is it's hard to overcook it, particularly when you cook it with the skin and the bone. Okay, into the oven. That is going to start smelling amazing. So now we're going to make the sauce. And I just wiped out the blender. You don't need to completely clean it. Don't make yourself crazy. And we're using scallions. And the whole scallions, all parts, the green and the white. Sometimes they just tell you to use the white because it's sweeter. The green is more pungent. Back into the blender. And then a little bit of lemon juice. And I'm going to squeeze that right in. This is about a tablespoon of lemon juice. So we're going to use a serrano. Now, a serrano is a wonderful chili. We need roughly 1/4 cup. I'm going to keep the seeds and the ribs in there. That's where all the hot stuff is. And because I like the hot stuff. But let me just say about serrano chilies, they're a little hotter than a jalapeno. If you really don't like a lot of heat, I would go for a jalapeno instead. But I'm going to do 2 chilies. I think that will be better. I'm eyeballing. I'm not the best at proportions, but this does not have to be exact. The thing with any chili, in any category, is even within the same family, all serranos are not the same. One could be very hot, one could be less hot, likewise with jalapenos. So you just have to, they smell hot. Sometimes what I do to make sure they're hot is I just rub my finger on a cut piece of it and taste it. But I can tell these are hot. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of goat cheese. What is goat cheese doing in here, you ask? Well, it's gonna add a creaminess and a tanginess. It's soft goat cheese, and we've got 1/2 cup, it's about 2 ounces, tablespoon of vegetable oil, and that's just flavorless vegetable oil. Now this is an odd ingredient, but it's an important part of it. This cream sauce is very rich, so we've got 1/2 cup of 1/2 and 1/2. And then we're gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Interesting concoction, huh? And about 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. That was exactly 1/4 teaspoon. Wow, doesn't that look delicious? I have to set aside 4 of these guys for dinner number 2, which we'll make on a later date. Now, if you really didn't want to make double duty, you could buy yourself a rotisserie chicken and just start there. But as I said, anytime you make something, make extra so you can turn it into another meal. So I'm going to put them on here, and everybody can help themselves, and I'm going to pour my sauce in there. Let's talk about what we'd serve with them. Staple crops in Peru are corn, potatoes, and beans. And we have corn here, and you're saying, what the heck is that? That's actually red quinoa. Quinoa is an ancient grain that comes from Peru. It's the super protein. It's just an amazing thing. It cooks in 20 minutes. It's a perfect weeknight choice. And this is a particular version that's red. I'm going to pour some of this juice right on top. And here's my green sauce. So, tonight we have Peruvian chicken thighs with the special green sauce. And tomorrow night, we're going to take this chicken and turn it into chicken nachos. Okay, it's day 2. I'm taking my leftover chicken thighs and taking the bone and skin off, and we're going to turn them into chicken nachos with salsa and cheese. I like to just chop them. You can shred them. I just feel that shredding takes so much time. I mean, maybe it's nicer, but I mentioned I'm a lazy cook. So I'm just going to chop these guys. I'm going to spread this chicken evenly over the tortillas. These are store-bought, but you can make homemade. They're so easy. Just brush oil on tortillas, and you can put a little chili, a little cumin on there, a little salt, bake it off, cut it into triangles before you actually bake it, and you'll have, nice homemade ones that are slightly lower in fat. Now for the cheese. I'm going to grate about 6 ounces of Monterey Jack cheese. You could use cheddar. You could use any cheese that melts nicely that you like, and you could certainly use a lower fat if you wanted to. But this is party night. Like, this would be a fun thing to have with the family on a Friday night. That looks good. So now we're going to sprinkle it. I feel sort of silly. This is a recipe, you say? But it is. Okay, we're going to pop this in a 400-degree oven just until it melts and gets hot, and it's going to be about 5 to 10 minutes. Oh boy, that looks delicious. But honestly, how can you go wrong with melted cheese? So I have some fun accompaniments. This is going to make it a little healthier. We've got some black beans. We've got some store-bought salsa. You can do green or red, or make your own salsa, green or red. Of course, a little sour cream. Yogurt would be a wonderful possibility as well. And some scallions. So there you go. Weeknight meals are that much easier when you can turn the work of one night's meal into another great one later in the week without too much fuss. I'm Sara Moulton. I'll see you next time for more weeknight meals. Sara's Weeknight Meals continues online. For recipes, helpful tips, messages, and lots more, visit us on the web at saramoulton.com/weeknightmeals. Funding provided by
Acacia Vineyard is proud to sponsor Sara's Weeknight Meals. With our handcrafted Chardonnay and Pinot Noir wines, we enjoy sharing the earth's bounty and the simple joy of bringing friends and family to the table.
At Subaru, we build vehicles like the versatile Subaru Outback with symmetrical all-wheel drive standard and plenty of cargo room. Because some of the most adventurous days fall in between the weekends. Subaru, a proud sponsor of Sara's Weeknight Meals.
My mom, she's a magician. She turns water into soda, saving the planet from bottles.
SodaStream, proud to support the magic of public television.
King Arthur Flour. Over 1,500 recipes online at kingarthurflour.com.